Welcome to GMA Talk, Global Mission Advocacy Talk, where we educate about refugees and migration issues around the world with your host, yours truly, Gerard. And today, this week, we are continuing the conversation on Congo, on the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in terms of the mining companies, the unrest in the country, the rape of women and children, and just the overall human rights, because all of this contribute to migration and refugees. And I have a special guest all the way in Pretoria, South Africa. Welcome, Mr. Tresor. How are you today?
Thank you, Gerard, for having me. I'm doing well. I'm great.
Okay, awesome. I'm very glad you could join us today. So let's just jump into it. First, introduce yourself, where you are living now, and where you are from, and what you are doing.
Oh, thank you. My name is Tresor Makunya. I'm an advocate at the Court of Appeal of North Kivu, which is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I am currently a doctoral researcher in international human rights and comparative constitutional law in Africa at the Center for Human Rights, the University of Pretoria in South Africa.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much for that short and brief introduction. And without further ado, maybe we can get into the topic of this our conversation. The past few weeks, a few days, we've been seeing a hashtag Congo is bleeding on social media. What is this about? Can you paint us a picture on what is this hashtag about?
Oh, thank you for this first question. And so when I saw the hashtag Congo is bleeding, I was actually a bit confused, trying to see what is going on actually in Congo. Why is it bleeding? And when I went through different information, and I just realized that perhaps the hashtag could have been rephrased and say, stop bleeding, because it is not like something which is starting, right? When you say Congo is bleeding, one assumes, especially those who do not know the situation of Congo,
yes,
one assumes it has only started, right? But what I realize is the continuation of a series of events that started perhaps around 1996. So perhaps there is an escalation of violence in certain area, but then Congo must not Congo is bleeding. But anyway, maybe I think the first issue one has to look at why is it bleeding. It's the issue of internal violence between national forces and armed groups. And when I talk about armed groups, I see foreign armed groups, and I see also national armed groups. We will talk about that later. So the other issue is what you've been emphasizing on, the issue of exploitation of natural resources, and where you have certain mining areas being controlled by armed groups. About armed groups, as I said, we have these two levels of armed groups, and the continuous use of children and women, which is one considers as vulnerable people. So the issue of using kids or children in natural resources exploitation did not start today. You have different initiatives trying to do a tracking, transparency, monitor all these issues. But you also have to locate the issue within the context or within the background of poverty, having children going to look for the means of survival, or kids also using it as a way of community participation, community taking advantage of the natural resources. You can't just have natural resources and then that will be used by other individuals or foreign companies. So perhaps that situation is also fueled by that dynamic. Let's also enjoy our resources, although it's against all the laws to exploit children, and children now end up being exploited. There is what one can look at is the mainstream political violence stemming from issues of elections in 2018 that were marked a lot of irregularities, and today the government that is in place is seen as being illegitimate because apparently, according to different reports, the current president was not actually the one properly elected. So you have violence, having individuals who think they are the one who wanted the president to be there, and the president, on the other hand, trying to flex his muscles to show that I'm in control, right?
Yeah.
And the last issue, which can be connected to armed groups, also is an issue of state failure, right?
Okay.
Yeah, those are
Okay. For sure. So, yeah, because it's very interesting, when you talk about the hashtag of Congo is bleeding, and in terms of the significance of stop the bleeding, or I've also seen others on social media which are saying like free Congo. There's so many hashtags circulating on social media. Then when you talk in terms of it has been like in depth like history or story of what is happening in Congo. So you already in terms of highlights in some of the mining or the rebel groups or the children, which we'll also get into shortly. But what is the condition of the human rights like in Congo, like whether it's like since 1996 and what is happening at the moment?
So yeah, there are two questions there. So you have the first level of the question is what has been happening since 1996, and then situation. So in terms of the 1996 one, what comes directly to the mind is the external invasion of the country, what people have tried to conceptualize as the first Congo War and second the immigration war. So this in 1996, at the time, the president of Zaire, which was Congo at the time, Mobutu was attacked by AFDL, Alliance des Forces Démocratiques pour la Libération, which were led by Congolese, Laurent Kabila, who eventually in 1997, but Laurent Kabila was backed up by foreign countries, chiefly Rwanda and Uganda, but also you had the Western powers behind them. Which could, at a certain point, no longer fulfill what they expected from him. So you have the May 17 May 1997, Laurent Kabila taking over the reign of the country in Kinshasa. And then later in August 1998, those who backed him before, apparently they could no longer understand each other in terms of their political deals, what the other one wanted. And Laurent Kabila put this clearly that those foreign invaders must give us the bill we are ready to pay so that they can go back home. And then you have now different armed groups being created in the Eastern Congo, and chiefly we have the Rally for Congolese Democracy, RCD, Rassemblement Congolais pour la Démocratie, and then creating different violence in the Eastern Congo. There were a lot of killings if you read different reports that have been written by the United Nations experts, particularly the mapping report. So in 1998, then you have a spiral of violence. So when you have the RCD, some people looked at as a Tutsi-led armed group, and then you have now the development, the increasing of domestic national defense movements. So if you are in South Kivu, for example, you are in Uvira, you have young people uniting themselves in groups like Mai Mai so that to defend, because as kind of state failures, the state can no longer secure the people. So we have to defend ourselves. So you have a lot of armed groups being created, some, in order to counter the hegemony of the RCD, but others also to the invading, to do what they want, to increase violence, to look for political leadership, to look for resources. So that's what then you have, and in 2005, 2006, you have the new dawn of democracy, a new accepted in 2005 referendum and then promulgated in February 2006. But before that, between 2003 and 2006, you had a political transition where all the armed groups accepted to come together in the transition government. And one thing one has to know at this level is this political transition, the political deal was signed in Pretoria here in South Africa. In my view, also, it launched a series of political agreements. In order to get political leadership, you need to control an army group, right? You need backup. So most people go in the bush, the government negotiates with them, and then they are given position in the military, they're given position in the administration. So those who say, oh, so for us also to get this, we have to do them. So it's kind of an eternal and unending vicious cycle. So, and it's weakened. And now you realize that you have more than 140 armed groups, and they know.
Well, it's a very interesting in terms of just the history, and the leadership and the conflicts, and even like the rebel groups, that is happening within the country. So and then you have already in terms of we say 140 something rebel groups. So like how is which sections or which areas of these rebel groups are mostly, and then at the same time, what is the role of the mining companies, their contribution either to peace or not peace within the country, like the role of the mining companies, and then together, like in terms of the activities which the rebel groups are doing to continue like instability in Congo.
Yeah, three questions. The first one, I wanted to clarify something in terms of the human rights situation. Then you ask. So briefly, it's that you have civil and political rights. Some people are exercising their political rights since the new regime in 2019. We see realization of civic space, although it's being constrained more. The more we continue, the more the government becomes a bit. The more government starts tightening up the civic space. So also the absence of, I can say, the socioeconomic side, economic rights, right to housing, being constantly violated, right to food, right to water, not being taken care of properly by the government. But also there is the issue of the right to education, where the Constitution provides free primary education, but then you have the government trying to say, yeah, the education should be free, but you see in terms of implementation, the policy is taking time and causing more havoc in the education system. So, where they most concentrated, most of them are concentrated in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and chiefly in two regions, North Kivu and South Kivu. Also, you have other groups in provinces like Ituri and others, and at one point you had political religious movement in the Congo Central region in the western country, what we call the Congo, and then you had other groups in the Equator region, but chiefly these are concentrated in the Kivu. So when one talks about the Kivus, of course you see South Kivu, North Kivu, and Maniema, but chiefly is the two north and south. So all of mining companies. I wanted first to also highlight something important in terms of these armed groups. So as I said earlier, some of them are nationals, national, which means they are created by Congolese, and others are foreigners, which means they come from outside Congo. And when I say they come from outside Congo, I see, for example, some armed groups which came from Burundi. I see other groups which came from Uganda, the allied, what they call ADF, Allied Democratic Forces. And I also see the ex-FAS, those who came from the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, the FDLR. So some of them are, they aim to ensure ethnic stability. For some, our ethnicity, our tribes have been marginalized for so long. We have to ensure that their interests are taken care of, and the only way to do this is to have an armed group where we can take guns and have a force, a bargaining chip that the government can contact us. For others is to exactly counter the hegemony of other ethnic groups, and some other would be clearly to control mining sectors, and then you have others being manipulated by foreign countries to serve their own interests. And the other armed group will be clearly seeking political leadership, just kind of backup, a kind of center of gravity where people can come at least and negotiate with us. And the last one, as I said, is clearly to inter-government entities, government positions, either in the army or in police or the administration, because the experience that has shown in 2003 Pretoria Agreement is that when you take guns against the country, you are rewarded with position in the army. That is one side of the coin. The other one, in terms of foreign rebel groups, you have these groups that are coming and to play as a backup. They use Congo as a ground for the attack of their own country. And if you recall, in 1998, Rwanda invasion was actually backed by this idea. Congo is unable to protect Rwanda against the FDLR, so we have to ensure that we go there and we do this. And later, even during Kabila era, Joseph Kabila era, you had these joint military operations between Congo National Forces and Rwandan National Forces to go and track all the FDLR, what we call Amani Leo, Kenya 1, Kenya 2. These were different operations that were but all these foreign armed groups also, some of them exploit natural resources and others are involved in this ethnic mobilization. What is then the role of mining sectors? The mining sectors is generally it belongs to the state, because the soil and subsoil is the property of the state. We, the citizens, can only have concessions, which means we only borrow from the state, either a perpetual concession when you are a citizen or a temporary concession when you are a foreign citizen. So mining companies are first and foremost enterprises, which means they seek profits. And when one lives in a capitalist system, which is guided by this quest to seek profit by all means, there are certain things that cannot be achieved in terms of peace, in terms of security, in terms of consolidation of national unity. So when mining companies, some of them are national, some of them are foreigners, they are also involved in these conflicts. In fact, the UN mapping report listed certain violations of human rights and international humanitarian law that were actually committed or abetted by mining companies. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights even ruled some years ago, I think in 2014, about these conflicts in Katanga, right, Katanga region, and then that is something one may need to look at. So they are involved in funding, according to a report, they are involved in funding rebel groups, and they are also fueling the conflicts.
Thank you very much in terms of for sharing the involvement of groups and the unrest which is happening in the country, including even the mining companies. So among all this, what has been the response of the Congolese government and just Congolese leadership?
So thank you again. So what I want to emphasize here is that in terms of government and states sometimes are different when you look at things theoretically, but then the state itself, the government, the leadership, political leadership, some of these people have been involved in human rights violations. If you read reports, certain in 2003, for example, when we had the political deal and when you have the interim government for around 3 years leading up to the first peaceful, free and fair elections, you had former armed group leaders becoming vice president. You had former armed group generals becoming part of the national armed forces. So what has been the response initially was to make what they call the tabula rasa, forget about the human rights violations, forget about accountability, forget about the reparation for the violation of international humanitarian law and the human rights. Let's prioritize peace. And for now, what I think peace has been used has been used to trump justice and reparation for human rights violations. So the response of the government has not been consistent and has not been proactive or pro-victim. It has been kind of passive. Let's see how things go and let's wait. So there are today certain movement, for example, we'll talk about it, trying to see how the mapping report, which was issued in 2010, after 2010, because then at the time, it was in 2010, yes. In 2010, you realize that some Congolese activists, some Congolese academics, some Congolese human rights actors are trying to see how an international tribunal can be established, as it was the case in Rwanda, as it was the case in former Yugoslavia, as it was the case in Sierra Leone or Cambodia, to try the perpetrators of these violations, right? So the government, in terms of response, it has tried also certain armed forces officials before tribunals, in order those who have committed sexual violence. The government also had tried to enact legislations, like in 2006, there was a sexual violence acts which tried to bring new crimes in the Congolese legal framework, and this has tried in a way or another to reduce the level of sexual violence, but it's still continuing. But I'm glad sometimes what has been known in the past as the capital of sexual violence is trying to wither away. But again, people should not expect too much or everything from government, right? Because they have interest, and if you look at what has been termed in theory the interest convergence theory, that change can only happen at the parts of the government. The people in government can only allow things that favor them, right? They cannot accept things that are against their interests, and it's up to the people, it's up to the oppressed, it's up to the victim to stand for themselves and to seek justice, to ensure that these armed groups are no longer perpetrating crimes, to ensure that national and foreign companies are not involved in activities that are going to jeopardize children's fate, women's fate, and the security of the country. I was reading some hours ago the 2020 illicit financial flows in Africa, where you clearly see that Africa loses every year around 88 billion, $88 billion US dollars. And this is generally in malpractice in tax and commercial practices. This is in illegal tender. This is in certain involvement in certain activities on terrorism and malpractice in finance, and this is in corruption. And the same report gives you a number of around 44 billion in terms of what Africa receives every year in terms of foreign aid. So you see what it loses and what it receives. there is a kind of half. So technically on paper, Africa does not need any dollar from the US, from the European Union, if they clean their mess inside. And this is particularly the case. The report singles out the issue of DRCs, the absence of transparency in the management of mining. If you look at statistics again, Congolese will dispute this because they will tell you, they always say that our country has natural resources as mine, but we don't live it in reality. The country has around 17% of diamonds reserved in the world. It has 34% of cobalt reserved in the world. It has 10% of copper reserved in the world. It has around 60 to 80% of coltan. This is involved in building your iPhone, your computer, and my phone. It's in Congo. So if you try to put more transparency and ensure that mechanisms are established for accountability and for sharing benefit with the people, because one of the questions that arises generally when it comes to national and international mining companies is, how do you ensure that local communities benefit from the exploitation of resources you are doing? And instead of merely using children, women, and fueling conflict, how do you ensure that local communities benefit? Because the Constitution provides that people have permanent sovereignty on their natural resources.
So then
people have to benefit.
Then when you already, like, in terms of talk about like how can we ensure like people benefit, then how are women and children caught in this conflict and this unrest, in terms of whether it's like being used as a sexual weapon or being used as a child soldier? Like, what's the what is the state of women and children in the conflict and in the Congo in general?
So children have been in the history of armed struggles. Children are the nicest prey military leadership can have, because, as this other guy said once, children technically, when they are fighting or when they're involved in something, they don't have a political agenda. They don't have something in mind they want to achieve. They don't have kind of change, for example, they want to bring. At a certain point, they just want to belong to something, to belong to a family or people who will secure them if they're in an armed control zone, or they want to support their family sometimes. If there is a collapse of the state, there is no longer financial support, you have more than 80% rate of unemployment in the country, and so everyone has to fend for themselves. Mobutu made this clearly when they said the Article 15, fend for yourself. So children now are now either forcefully they are conscripted or enlisted in armed forces, or they go willingly in the mining activities to offer the cheap labor and working for more than 12 hours a day. Against all the conventions which are out there. And women is the same thing. Women, you have a cultural practice that if you control the women in a community, you also weaken the men. This is patriarchy, where you have to put the woman at a certain price. You have to thingify, you have to objectify a woman. So there is that practice where women are looked at as objects, and this continues. That's how you use them for sexual violence. That's how you use them sort of to weaken the men in the community, or the men who are fighting against yourself. So the response of the government has been not only, as I said, to vote for legislation, but also to ratify international conventions like the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa, what they call the Maputo Protocol, and that you try to ratify the protocol, and then on the other side try to raise awareness on this on women's rights, because you now raise awareness on trying to reduce cultural practices that are harmful to women, try to reduce domestic violence, try to reduce economic and other social hardship that are imposed imposed on women. But that's fine in terms of justice mechanisms. The question now is, what does justice mean? This is a huge question and a huge debate in period. And when someone will ask you, does justice mean that pronouncing case decision, sentencing a perpetrator to 10 years and saying that the victim will have $50,000 compensation that they will never get? That's justice? Or do we reduce the level of crimes? Do we reduce the level of involvement of different individuals, armed groups, and soldiers in violence, sexual violence, by sentencing them to 20 years or 15 years? Or we need some other sort of justice? Should it be only punitive? Should it be distributive? Should it be restorative justice? These are, I think, in my view, some of the issues people should take on board in order to look for lasting solutions for the problem that is going on in the country. Instead, and in my view, instead of just applying standards brought from the West or somewhere else because you went to a university in Canada, in South Africa, or in Europe, and then you come to apply what you've learned. I think there is a way to Africanize and to think local when it comes to these mechanisms.
Okay. So then how is this, when you talk about like the way the women and children are being treated or they are being used in the conflict, so then how has the unrest contributed to the displacement of Congolese people and Congolese people becoming refugees within the neighboring countries, or even like as far as, North America, Australia, or Europe?
So that is interesting because then when you look at the violence which started in 1996, where you saw the huge increase in movement of refugees and internal displaced persons, because when you read, for example, different statistics today, they will tell you that in Congo you have around in Congo itself, not people, not Congolese going outside, but what you call emigration. You look at 527,000 refugees from other countries living in Congo, mainly refugees and asylum seekers, right? So you have those coming from Rwanda, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Burundi, Republic of Congo, and Angola. They are in Congo as refugees. 73% of them actually live in rural area, and 25% are in refugee camps or camps units, right? But then if you look at Congo itself, you have 905,059 Congolese refugees scattered all over Africa and in those African countries, most of them are in refugee camps, right? So the question is not only about armed conflicts, because some of these are economic migrants. They leave the country to go to look for economic opportunities outside. But the bulk of them are actually, these are refugee and displacements induced by conflict. And the same conflicts which started in 1996 and then it went through 2003 and then continue. You have now Congolese in different refugee camps in Malawi, in Zimbabwe, in Namibia, Mozambique, perhaps others are in South Africa. But inside the country itself, you have different statistics, but they can tell you that we have over 5 million internal displaced Congolese.
Wow.
So those people who did not leave the borders, but they are within the Congo. And this is, again, you can link it to mainly the internal violence and ethnic violence or political upheavals.
Wow. It's very hard to imagine, when you say 5 million internally displaced people, and then on top of that, still hosting so many refugees, from the neighboring countries. So then when we talk about solutions or the work that is being done within the country among Congolese people, or even the diaspora people, to stabilize the situation or even help fellow Congolese. So can you talk to us about PAN's Foundation and what the organization does within the country? And also understand there's a hospital like PAN's or Panzi hospital in Bukavu and the foundation.
Yeah. So first, what the diaspora can do, I think diaspora, some of them are already doing great job to be the voice of voiceless, because some people in the country cannot speak for themselves, not only because of the fear for the security, reprisal, and all these kind of measures. So someone who is outside the country is believed to speak freely than someone who can be in the country. Although, of course, being in the country can also be another opportunity to know what is going on. So be the voice of the voiceless is something very important, and to especially to these different people that can influence the situation at the domestic level, like the United Nations, the other international organizations which are involved in the country, WHO, WFP, and others. So the diaspora can do that. But this is something you rely on someone else. There is also another way as a Congolese living in the diaspora, you can do things for your own country. To believe that the country in itself has the solutions. The solution does not need to come from someone else, right? One of the mistakes we always commit is to expect that the solution will come from somewhere else apart from Congolese themselves. So there is that mistrust among people or within the political leadership itself, being more lenient to whoever comes from the West than your brother Congolese. So that is also part of the colonial legacy, where the colonial system was built in such a way to provide this image of white supremacy, white superiority, where everything good can only come from white people, right? And we as blacks cannot do anything. So if the moment we start thinking blacks, we start thinking Africans in terms of solution, and look to other people just for ideas and support, and not put all our hopes there, put all the eggs in one basket, saying that only the solution will come from that. Then we will start seeing the solution. We will start seeing the prospect. Because what you then have is whoever comes to power tends to rely on foreign lobbyists or foreign embassies and others to help him sustain his power in the country. And when you are relying on the people who have their own agendas, they are in Congo for various reasons, right? They are there not for you. It's for the interests of their own country, and you only have one country. You only have Congo. Apart from Congo, you don't have another one. So you better have to deal with it. The diaspora also can change the narrative, because what we have, we live in a globalized world where anything that happens in a second, it's tweeted, it's posted on Facebook, it's on Instagram, and some of these informations are based on wrong premises, on the premises and the premises of incapacity of Congolese to deal with their own problems, and inability of Congolese to live together, to live in peace, or to be one nation, right? The nation state. So if we start changing the narrative, whatever happens in the country, you first think before tweeting. You first think before posting. And Akon put this once clearly, telling you that there are more crimes happening in the US, in Chicago, and elsewhere. But this is the image American will never sell to the external world. So if we as a diaspora also think that trying also to sell a positive image of our country, although the Western media are trying also to show that everything is bad whenever they're in the country. Listen, those guys who are a reporter in Congo, I've been a journalist for around 6 years. So you know which kind of information are approved by the chief editor and which kind of information are not approved. If it's an information selling good things every day, so sometimes it won't go through. But if you talk about conflicts somewhere, it's a priority there, a given priority. Yeah. So these people are there to sell their own view. So we have to change the narrative. We have to focus on something else. In the meantime, we are building our own capacity to resolve our problems. So we also have to invest in building economy, you know. I was reading the report on migration, and they will tell you that the diaspora, the remittance in Congo is part of economy, right? Most people in the country are not working, but go and see in front of Western unions, go and see in front of money grounds in Congo. You always have queues and queues, people queuing to wait for money, either coming from Canada, France, Belgium, the US, South Africa, and elsewhere. So you see clearly that the diaspora is already contributing to the national economy. But some of these actions could be done formally, you know, not only in informal economic activity, but formally, and try to build the country's capacity. So that I think the diaspora can be helpful. So in terms of the Panzi Hospital, which is spearheaded today by Dr. Denis Mukwege, has been instrumental in helping women who have been victims of sexual violence to regain their confidence, to regain their dignity by conducting surgeries and gynecological operation and health on them. So it's a great partner which has also some external donors, and it's doing a great job in the country. You have Panzi Foundation, which is also working together with Dr. Denis Mukwege and trying to put forward this idea of having the mapping report, the UN report that I said was published in 2010, in order to ensure that there is accountability, because one of the salvation of a victim of human rights violation is to see the perpetrator being tried. Whether that will bring justice or not is another question. People can argue about that, but the moment someone is jailed and is in custody, at least half of justice would have been brought. Although I can contend that much still needs to be done. So there are certainly certain activities going on, but what I wanted to emphasize on is that self-reliance is very, very important. You know, as a nation, as a country, believing that we are able to do something is something important, and we cannot continue in a situation where Africans or Black people are made to believe that they can't do anything. You know, so be that political upheaval, be that human rights violations, be that economic, illicit financial flows at the Congo level and at the African level, there is a way people can start putting the interests of Congo first and not interests of multinational companies first, and then try to bring some certain solutions to the problem. And I think from there we will start bringing hope for so many people who are actually hopeless.
Oh, thank you very much for that in-depth, in terms of knowledge and in-depth detail of what the diaspora can do and what is happening on the ground, and even like the Panzi Foundation and the hospital. So then when we talk about in terms of what people can do and governments and organization, then which role on this one does the international community have in terms of to ensure greater accountability on the mining companies and then the rebel groups and just the unrest that is happening? So speak to us in terms of that, specifically in terms of the role or the way the international community can ensure accountability among the mining company or helping the country in general. And then also for you yourself, where do you see Congo heading, from here on forth?
Yeah, I tend to be optimistic about the capacity of Congolese to find solutions for themselves. And And I don't believe, as I said clearly, that solution will always come from somewhere else, or from some lobbies or some bureaucracy located in DC or in Ottawa or in Pretoria, right? So when you look at this very clearly, then you find a situation where there is need for people to sit together to devise what they need for themselves, and then the international community will come to support what people have decided for themselves. But I understand we live in a globalized world. We live in a place where there is a transnational economy, transnational crime. So certain solutions will have to depend on the policies and agenda of other countries and international actors. But again, first seek your own salvation before someone else comes to help you. Know what you want before asking help. You can't just go to somebody and say, we need your support. And then they will ask you first, what kind of support? You say, and then the next question, then your next question will be, what can you offer? Right? But when you know exactly what you can do, this, and this is the first one should be to reduce the level of corruption, because people are more and more corrupted, and the corruption they're doing. You have petty and grand corruption, but political leaders and all these people involved in mining deals are very, very famous in being involved in grand corruption, and the country is losing. The report I was talking about noted, for example, that DRC lost in between 2000 and 2010 only on these mining deals around 9.95 billion. Only for the importation in the European Union, not worldwide. The European Union importing stuff from Congo, they were undervalued to the level that the country lost 9.95 billion. Imagine if you scattered this on all the deals with other companies not in the EU and all. This is a huge amount of money. And how does this continue? How do you receive an aid from Japan of 5 million or 40 million, while yourself you stole some days or some month ago 40, 57, 60 million? So the Japan helps you with 50 million and you stole 60 million. So that's problematic. The international community and other bilateral or multilateral donors can still help you, but if you don't have that notion of state, notion of integrity, notion of proper and wise management of resources, that's problematic and we can't move forward. So let's first think as Congolese first, not as individual, what do I gain here, but what policies do we put in place so that other people come to study to Congo? We no longer go outside to study and come. I was told in the 60s, 70s, people were going to study in Congo.
Wow.
People were going to study in Congo, leaving their own country, they come. But now you have small, of course, you still have people coming from Burundi being at the universities, but it's not like you can have foreigners studying in South Africa, for example. So let's try to look at this issue of corruption very, very, very clearly. Let's also build a social cohesion where you look at your fellow Congolese not as a competitor or as an invader or as someone who is trying to mistreat you, but as a partner or someone with whom you are bound together. Because, theoretically, no one can assure their own security. No one can assure that their own interests are met. We decided to give that power to someone, and that one is a superhuman that we call the Leviathan, the state. We said, let's put together our interests and give it to the state so that the state can look after our general interests. The Leviathan. Thomas Hobbes clearly put this. And now, let's help the Leviathan to do this. But let's also maintain some powers to control the Leviathan. Don't just assume that the state will do everything which is in our own interest. The state is made up by people like you and myself, which who have their own interests, and sometimes they can prioritize their interests and the interests of their families than the general interest. So how do we ensure that we can exert pressure on the government in a coherent and cohesive manner? We have to be united. So the other issue is still do we need to think or rethink the nature of the state do we have? Does the nature of the state we have, is it conducive to our interest as people? Or it's a project which was designed to help people enrich themselves? Because one of the idea one can get, let me go to power and get money. How do we ensure that we change that narrative, that mindset? We are going to serve, not to be served. We are going to help the country move forward. Because the colonial project was exactly to build a state which will bring more money to Belgium, to France, to Britain, not a state which will deliver service to people on the ground. So how do we ensure that we build a state which will now, where when you are a president or a minister, you don't see that now it's my turn to eat, but it's my turn to serve. So that's also project has to change. But we have to also look at other dynamics, geopolitical dynamics. But I think those are some of the issues.
Okay. Wow, that's it's very in terms of you have touched all the pieces in terms of how everybody can help or involve or even like consider the issues very in depth that is happening on the ground. So in terms of bringing everything briefly like together, among everything we have talked about, whether it's the history, the rebel groups, the mining companies, the unrest, the refugees and the displacement of people. So in a very short brief, like is there something else that you'd like to highlight that I haven't asked or that I forgot to ask?
I see there is an increase among the young people generally of the interest in state management. This is generally also helped by the development of new technologies where you can know what is happening in terms of human rights violation. You can post it and you can share in different groups, and then people can be aware. They can start to discuss, and they can seek more and more accountability. Whenever someone does this, they denounce it. So that's, I think, should continue. That brings hope, right? That brings hope, and seeing people starting to criticize the foreign interference in the way Congolese are conceiving the issues is, I think, also it's a momentum that has to be supported. So what I think, and at the end of it, is to believe that Congolese, and as one of them, that we have the power to change, to bring about change, to bring about peace. If we start by putting Congo first, if we start by changing the narrative, if we start by believing in our capacity, our economy, and looking for help as just a supplement to what we've already devised, not as to give credence to what we are doing, to legitimize. Because when XY country supports you, your action is more legitimate. So we have to do this, and we also have to rethink the foundation upon which, be that moral, philosophical, or theoretical foundation upon which our countries is built, whether we still continue with that colonial understanding of the state where people come to enrich themselves, or we try to change that. It's about serving, right? It's about serving. If we embrace the communitarian ethic of Africans, the idea of Ubuntu as compassion, serving the community, helping each other. You are because I am, and your identity is molded in mine, although I keep my particularities. Those are values that we can start using to induce change, to reduce violence, to reduce also political violence, and to enhance state capacity to address security issues and accountability for gross human rights and international humanitarian law violation.
Mm-hmm. Wow, awesome. Thank you very much, for your time and for very explaining to us on the situations, that is happening in Congo, and also, what people can do in terms of supporting the situation on the ground and just Congolese people in general. So again, yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much for your time, Mr. Tresor Makunya. And yeah, just wishing you the very best in your continuous advocate, in your continuous studies, and yeah, and hopefully, we'll have you again next time in terms of, just talking more in terms of the human rights issues, even in other African countries. But yeah, to everybody else, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for watching. Please do share. Please don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, right here on the GMA Talk, love, peace, and unity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.